Welcome to the Professor Slots Podcast. We help slots enthusiasts improve their slots gambling performance with next-level tactics and strategies. Want to accelerate your slots journey, be more profitable, and understand casinos better to take advantage of them? You're in the right place. The Professor Slots team has over a decade of experience providing strategies for slots enthusiasts just like you. And now, to help you, here's Dr. John Friedel, Professor Slots.
Hello. Today's episode 154 of the Professor Slots podcast is the audio recording from my YouTube live stream of Saturday, December 18th, 2021. Please enjoy this lively interview with Keith. His contact information is Keith James. His email is keith@macpa.email, and his mobile phone number for further questions is area code 507-269-2427. Keith's contact information is included in the show notes wherever you are listening to this podcast episode. Without further ado, here's my interview with Keith about gambling record keeping, especially for slots enthusiasts. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody. We are having a sort of a special event. Out of the nearly 100 live streams that I've done, I've never had a guest before. So now we have a guest. This is Keith James. He is a certified public accountant with a company called Mid-Atlantic CPAs. He's my accountant, and we have questions, as I mentioned in the last live stream. Please ask your questions, and you can continue to do so now. I've got a collection of them, but ask your questions and for a CPA about gambling record keeping, and we will see how today's session goes. A little back and forth, and already a few issues, but I want to say thank you. Thank you to Chuck for his donation. And as usual, Chuck says, "Good morning, all." Chuck has been a great supporter. He adds a penny every time he's given a donation of $20. So he's given $20 48 times. And I guess that's I only mention this because today's topic is record keeping. And this is how he keeps track. Thank you, Chuck. It's very much appreciated and supported the show. To get things started here, I want to try to, lay down the basics. I know some of you have won hand pays. I know some of you have kept gambling records, but I did a survey of my entire audience in early 2021, for those of you watching this later. And I asked the question, do you keep gambling records? And 41% of respondents said they did. So 59% said they did not. So I've always tried to provide some documents, some articles on this content. We've had a few live streams where I've pointed out some of the IRS rules to help people, but I wanted to get a professional here because I always have to say, I am not an income tax professional. Please check with one. Well, I thought we'd have a guest who in fact was. So please say hello to Keith. Hey, Keith, how are things going today?
Good, thank you. I appreciate you having me on here. Hello, everybody. My name's Keith James. I am John's CPA. I have a firm, Mid-Atlantic CPAs. I'm based here in beautiful Northeast Pennsylvania in the Poconos, and I am here to help answer some of the questions as we barrel towards year end. It's always a time that everyone always has questions of, I've done all these things all year, now what do I do? So John loves his community. He asked me to come on here to help with those types of questions. So I'm excited to help people and be a resource for the community John has built, which is awesome.
And I'd like to point out to everybody that I am not paying Keith to be here, but I also want to mention, just to be clear, that while he is near the Poconos and Pennsylvania, you can be hired by anyone in the U.S.
That's correct. That's
okay.
Correct. We do work in every state. Yep, we do work in every state. So, and I'm right by Mount Airy Casino. It's in my backyard. I've told John that before, so I can kind of walk through the woods to it. In essence, it's right in my backyard.
So eventually when I get to Airy, I will be stopping by to see my accountant.
Yes.
And so if you're looking for help, I will quickly mention that if you look in the video description is Keith's email, mobile phone number, all that contact information. And so let's jump into it. Where to start? There is also in the video description, a couple of links to the IRS. They have a database of publications and topics. So I'm going to share a little bit of that because I want to make sure that we cover what people have not done before. For instance, maybe you haven't won a hand pay. You don't know what that's like. You don't know what the tax form looks like at the time of getting that. And there's really two topics today. I'm going to try to stick with, the tax part of this, but there's also keeping these records for gameplay analysis, for knowing what your casino offered last Valentine's Day and having a record that would be tacked on to what the IRS would need. So I'll handle some of those questions while I'm trying to keep those up to a certain limit. The questions that were asked by people in advance of this live stream did include some things that basically, just ask me these questions. But the first thing I wanted to say is if you win a jackpot, and we have questions on this, but if you win a jackpot, a hand pays don't have to be $1,200 or more. They can actually be less than that. It's a matter of the casino not wanting to have vouchers that print out more than a certain amount. Sometimes it's 800, sometimes it's 600. It's not having to do with the limit, but it's more like a fraud prevention thing going on at the casino where no voucher is ever printed out that goes over a certain amount. And so they have a slot attendant come up and hand you the cash instead of just coming out of the machine as a printed voucher. That doesn't automatically generate a W-2G. Now, which asks the question, what is a W-2G? I mean, if you've never seen one before, I just want to make sure everybody kind of is prepared here. I know I had a stack of 50 of them in 1 year and another 50, 40 so in the next year. So I've seen one or two, but I thought I would share my screen and we would go to the first IRS link in the video description. This is topic number 419, gambling income and losses, right? Spot on to what the IRS, and this is irs.gov. So that link is here. The first thing I want to show you is they talk about this form right here. The casino is required to issue a W-2G. Well, I'm not trying to get into the weeds just yet. I just wanted to show you one. And so this is what the blank form looks like. And some of these things are mandatory. Some of the things aren't mandatory. When you apply for a players club, you actually answer the information necessary to fill out this form, like your address and some other things. Now, over here, box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, some cashier window, all these other things. Some of them are optional. Like it may not tell you which machine and machine number is on that was recorded, but sometimes they do. So this is some of these winnings aren't identified because if you win something over $1,200 or more when it's a horse race, and then it doesn't have a race. But then if you're on an HHR machine in Kentucky or some of the other states, maybe it sort of does. So I just wanted to make you familiar with these, what a W-2G looks like. Other than that, there's just trying to figure out the best way to proceed here before we get into the questions. If you win a taxable jackpot, if you win a taxable jackpot of $1,200 or more on a slot machine, then the taxes are usually automatically withdrawn. Where in the states that I play, and maybe Keith can comment on this, and I'll basically hand it over to him. But in the states that I've won hand pays, a couple, one state made the state taxes federal, the state taxes were mandatory, but the federal was not. In Ohio, just to be clear, in Ohio, they automatically removed state taxes. And because I was in the city of Cincinnati, city taxes.
City tax, yep.
But they made federal optional. That was up to me, and including how much I would care to remove. But then I was in a tribal casino in Connecticut, and I won a $4,500 hand pay at a high limit pull event, and no taxes were taken out. So we may have some hard questions for Keith here about, so if you're on a reservation, why do they do that? I don't think the question is whether it's required to be taxable. If it's taxable income, I don't need to, quiz you on reporting methods of casinos on reservations. That might be a little bit outside of your expertise. So, is there any comments you want to make now before we?
Sure. So you bring up some very good points. Like every state and every casino could be a little different, right? Depending where you are, depending what state you're in, they could hold tax or not, right? Same thing with the tribal reservation you're talking about. They might not have a withholding requirement, right? Because they're on a tribal land where they don't have a withholding requirement, but the person who wins it doesn't change that it's taxable income for them. And that's the big difference that John's talking about, is every state, every locality will be different, right? So when you get your W-2G that John walked through on the screen, it could look different for everyone that's in this stream, depending on where they won a jackpot. Some casinos don't do very good at it, even though they're supposed to do it. Even here in Pennsylvania, I've seen where people have, given me their Excel sheet very similar to what that John has, but John's sheets are very detailed and very good. And, they will keep track of all those things. And it'd be amazed that sometimes some casinos don't hold the state tax and others do. And then others will do, when you get over the $1,200, withhold tax, and others don't. That's on the casino at the end of the day. It has nothing to do with you personally, what you need to do. How it affects your taxes is how it affects your taxes. So gambling winnings is taxable. You're supposed to aggregate them all and keep track of them all. I know I saw a couple of comments going on in the stream about that, where people are like, well, I went on a 4 or 5 days and I was doing it. It's like the whole time you're gambling, you're supposed to pay and keep track of your winnings. The same thing, you have to keep track of it, because at the end of the day, you need to put it on your tax return. So, record keeping is super important. Record keeping to the IRS is super important if you ever get audited. So that's where the rubber meets the road. Is some people don't do it very well. I'm a CPA. I see people hand off very bad documentation. So gambling winnings, if you win big, it draws attention to yourself, right? Because it's something that doesn't show up on everyone's tax returns. And that's kind of how the IRS machine learning has kind of started to do auditing, was where they see differences in tax returns or year over year over a 3-year trend. And all of a sudden you have this line of other income, because that's where it rolls up to. And there's a big number. That's where they start looking, starts drawing attention. So record keeping is very important for this community.
I will share that the first year that I got a W-2G, I got something like 13 of them. I write about this in my book, and I got audited. I don't think, possibly as because of the change, I hadn't really thought of that. My little understanding of what little they told me about why I was being audited, had more to do with the casino maybe not reporting all the W-2Gs that I had reported. And I was like, whoops.
Correct. So if you get one, report it, right? Keep track of yourself, because just because they don't issue a W-2G doesn't mean if the casino got audited that they don't have a log and they just forgot to send it to you, right? That happens also for people. Not only W-2Gs, but like 1099s. People think, if I don't get a 1099, I don't need to report the income. Same thing with the W-2G. Not the case. That onus is on you as the taxpayer, regardless of what everyone else, if they don't comply and don't issue things, that does not matter in the IRS's eyes. You are responsible for yourself at the end of the day.
And so for those who don't know, just to be clear, a 1099, the type is called a miscellaneous. This is often seen with contractors, but it's a secondary use. I'm sure there's more than 2 uses for it, but it's called a promotional prize. And if you win a car and accept the cash, then you get a 1099 instead of a W-2G. it's still coming from the casino. It's less common than 15 W2Gs in a single day. But once a year, somebody might win a card, and that's tends to be how the casino pays you. Now, there's other things like slot tournaments and some other things where they might give you a 1099 instead of a W2G, just to be full and upfront about the two forms you would get. And I didn't want to spend too much time on the 1099, but it's promotional prize and it's accepted for similar purposes. Right. So there's a couple of things that are in. Yep. I see lots of comments. I missed one. Magpie 11 has given a donation. She always, Magpie 11 always says winners, calls us winners, pay taxes with gratitude. And that's kind of what I wanted to mention. Didn't want to let it slide under the radar. Everything that you win at a casino is taxable, including the fair market value of any comps that you receive.
That's correct.
And so they may not tell you how much that fluffy blanket cost, but you'll have to look it up. They may not tell you how much that chip dip tray cost. I have a very nice porcelain one downstairs. And I think I actually spent $10,000 that day at the casino, but I did get a very nice chip dip tray. And as we all joke, we were all carrying them around the casino that day. But these things are taxable. And I see a lot of comments. I tend not to overreact on the comments that I sometimes see in my Facebook groups for each state and things on YouTube about, just under the taxable limit. I won $1,000 or $1,199, and I just under the taxable limit. And I'm like, there is no taxable limit.
That's correct. All income is taxable in the IRS's eyes, regardless of the piece of paper you get or not.
And I know that's pretty controversial, but Keith is a professional, and this is the stand he must take, and so you get the truth rather than the hope. Now, we've touched on a bunch of questions that I have on my list. I'll see if I can get through these. One of the questions was, and I think the best thing for me to do is maybe type this into, put this into the chat so people can read the question, and I'll display it. Here we go. We'll see how well this works. So the question I got, when the casino gives you free play, is it the same value? You can answer this, Keith, or if you know, I know the answer to this.
From an operations perspective, if they give you I don't know how they track it. So if you can give me more operational detail, they track it, right? Because they track them on cards typically, right? If they give you free play. So it's promo.
Yes. Well, the easiest answer for, I could tell people, but I like to give them, help them learn to fish rather than giving them the fish.
Yep.
So no doubt, if you haven't been a member of a players club, you received a mail flyer in the mail. It's in the fine print. So, I will tell you what basically it says in English, which is it has very little value, some fraction of a penny.
Yeah, because it's not revenue. It's not revenue for the casino. So that's why IRS tries to balance it out. If it was revenue for the casino, they would say it's taxable, but it's not really revenue for the casino because they're kind of giving out promotional play in essence.
Right. And so all that's written in legalese in the small font right next to the asterisk in the footer of the flyer. So if you ever want to know, for certain what your casino does, it's all part of the legalese that's available there. Now, if you go in and you spend it and you win something from it, This is
The
where
winnings is
I have my
taxable.
biggest problem. This is where I have my biggest problem, which I wanted to ask Keith about. Let's say I put $100 into the machine and I spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I spend it, I win $100. So I put $100 in while spending it. I won $100. And then I kept going and I spent that $100. How much did I spend? How much did I win? I'm stumped by this because, I mean, my problem here is record keeping. I don't know how to keep track of, I mean, we're diving into the deep end now. I don't know how to keep track of bet by bet. In fact, the casinos, some states in the gaming regs have, they say you can't use your phone as a gambling aid or whatever. It's a felony. So, I know some people in a practical sense will keep track of the money they brought to the casino, including any ATM withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they leave, how much they leave with, including any ATM deposits and W-2Gs and all of that. This is a very, I just, sometimes I see the IRS rules as being hard to follow.
I would say you would do the conservative view there, right? So what I would say is, okay, so I came in and I know I spent 100 in that scenario that you just said, right? And I know I walked out at the end of the day with 400. So I have 100 that I spent to get 400. That's how I would record keep it as the most conservative view.
That's wonderful. And I want to point out something subtle in what you said. You want to report that you took 100 in and you took 400 out. And that's what you tell the IRS. The IRS has a problem with casino players clubs offering win-loss statements, which only report the difference.
That's right. They do this, the delta.
Yeah. And I know that some of them are now starting to report wins and losses and the subtraction of the two.
That's right. Because think about it, it's similar with the stock market, right? You invest $100, it goes up to 400, you sell it, the difference is 300. You can see your earnings, what it costs you to do it, and you pay tax on the 300. That's a similar way to think about it, right? To kind of do the parallel is I walked out with 400, I spent 100 to get it, you're going to pay tax on the 300.
Right.
That's
but
the way
IRS would like to have both numbers. And a lot of people just say, well, I'll report the difference. Correct.
So record keeping, like you would show the 400 and the 100, so you know your difference. Plus, it helps you with your metrics, with what your community does at the end of the day, also.
Excellent. I want to do a couple more of the questions that I collected last weekend. Let's see. Here's one about a married couple. And I will share that as soon as it comes up. For a married couple filing jointly, what is the income level required to even file a return below which one need not file?
So from that perspective, it's going to be, if it's above the standard deduction, which is the $12,400. So you typically wouldn't if you made more than that because you would be zero. So it wouldn't make any sense. So it's earned income at the end of the day. So once you get above that threshold, you wouldn't do that. Hopefully that helps.
Pardon my ignorance. Is it different for single people?
Well, yeah. So for single people, it'd be the 12.4, and for this year, it'd be 24 and change for married couple would be the threshold. So
12,400 individuals.
That's correct. So I'll give you an example. When people who are or higher up in age, when they just have Social Security income and no other earned income, they're not doing tax returns anymore because there's no earned income because you're just getting Social Security income, which is not taxable over certain thresholds. So you don't do tax returns anymore. So that's akin to that question also.
Okay. And I have another question, and pardon me for not kind of like grouping them into various topics. One of the concepts that is kind of new to people is is it casino by casino, a separate report, or can I win at one, lose at another, or do I have to lose at the same one I won at?
It doesn't matter, right? It's the aggregate for the year, for the calendar year, is what you're record keeping to, right? Now, and the details for analyzing what this community does, it's important, right? But from a tax perspective, it doesn't matter. It's all aggregate in one year. You can be at 75 different casinos and have 75 wins and, all these losses. It does not matter. That's why you're aggregating up from a record keeping perspective.
But that's for federal.
That's for federal. Correct.
So it would be separate by state.
That's correct. Every state's different also. Some states will withhold. So if you're docile and live in one state and you go to another, there might be a withholding requirement. So you might get into a situation where you're actually doing a non-resident return just because you gambled in one state, just to get the money withheld from that state that they withheld for you. So that's another thing to watch out for. You might get into these non-resident state returns. We were just talking about federal level, and John gave up a good point about state level. Every state's different, and you might have taxes withheld in, again, Pennsylvania, but you live in Texas. In Texas, you don't pay any state tax. So you might have to do a Pennsylvania return to get that tax back because you're not a resident. You would do a non-resident return.
Yeah. You may have to have a state return for every state you gambled in, including your state of residence, if you spent money.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be clear about that. That's one of the other questions I haven't posted. Have them talk about federal versus state requirement, and we've been doing that kind of like all along. Let's see. We're gonna switch to the live chat in a moment, but I wanted to get through the other questions that we had here. Okay, I got a tough question that at least it's tough to me, and maybe you can. I'm sure you will have something to say about this one. So, and because this is likely to go into a podcast, I will ask the question, which is, I assume that gambling losses can't be carried forward if you didn't have gains equal to losses, like capital gains losses from stock sales that exceed all gains.
Correct. They are not carried forward. It's in the year for the year. So that's one thing that people have asked me before. So your gambling losses offset your gambling winnings in that year. So, and also just remember that the only way you get to take a gambling loss is if you itemize on your federal tax return. So let's talk from the federal perspective. So again, if you have $5,000 and it's up to your winnings. So if you have $5,000 in winnings and $8,000 in losses, you can't take more losses than you have winnings. Then the second level to think about is, if you're not doing itemized deductions, you're not getting the $8,000 in losses on your tax return either. So it's kind of a two-prong way to think about it from that perspective.
Thank you. There is a question. We've answered some of the other questions, or at least the answer is in the things that we just said, even though the specific question wasn't asked. Just looking through some of these questions, some of the slots enthusiasts that are fans also play table games. And I was surprised to learn a few things about how rare W2Gs are when playing craps or blackjack. It all comes down to the value of a single bet, where if you have many games going and you're doing many rolls as the shooter on a game of craps, none of them went over the limit, and so you may end up winning a lot, but it doesn't generate a W2G. It's still all taxable income because all of it is, and that's kind of answers the question that I had from somebody last weekend. But it incrementally grew until they eventually paid at the end of the game after many small bets were completed. I hope that makes sense to people. I don't know that you necessarily have a comment, Keith. The thing I'm trying to hammer home, and it isn't making me any fans, it never has made me any fans, is, it's all taxable. They give you a glass pitcher. Better find out how much that costs. Look on Amazon. And
I get those questions a lot too, right? I noticed there was one that was in the chat that I get asked a lot is about, scratch offs, lottery losses like that can offset. That's gambling. So
did we lose you, Keith?
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry. Hiccup from Northeast Pennsylvania, I guess. Can you guys hear me all right?
I'm not sure if we missed anything. I was going to start going through the live chat and see these kinds of questions, because it is a common question, and I want to hit the common questions.
Yeah.
So I think I'll go ahead. No,
go ahead. No, that's fine. Okay. Sorry.
Yep. So I basically scanning the from the beginning before the show started and seeing if I missed anything. Kenny Rogers was the song Gambler. I don't know what that's about. I'm moving on.
No one to hold him, no one to fold him.
So Chris asks the question: if I go to Vegas for a week, win some days, lose other days, does IRS expect the winning days to be reported? Is the whole trip considered one session?
The one session doesn't matter from the IRS. Every dollar you made and every dollar you spent should be reported and tracked. It's as simple as that, Chris. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So the whole time, just keep track, use the method that, John has provided, in his gambling loss items, that, the gambling record sheet that he has. That does a very great detail, and that is perfect to hand off to your accountant or use yourself, whatever way you do taxes, TurboTax, whatever that may be. It's a great way to just keep track of everything for yourself. So keep track of all that sessions when you're in Vegas on your gambling sessions, and you'll be good from a compliance perspective.
So thank you, Keith, for that. I do sell, if you need somebody to create an Excel spreadsheet for you, or what's called a CSV format, and so in case you don't have Microsoft but you have something else like the free stuff, or you can open these things, or just print out a PDF. I do sell those on my website in my shop. That's where you would go, and that's the cost of them. And so that's available to you. However, if you have my book, I'm also creating an audio version of the book, which is really hard to show a diagram. So for people who enjoy the, let me close that. For the people who enjoy the audio book, then on Amazon, all the forms that are in the physical book, electronic or paperback or hardcover, are shown at professorslots.com/forms, including, and nobody's asked me to stop scrolling, including these 4 tables. You can make them the size of a sheet of paper, and that's what I did with the forms that I sell. But these are the information that you can write down. I tried to make it really simple, only what the IRS wants. And that's basically what we've been talking about. We haven't been spending much time talking about gameplay analysis, recording your W-2Gs if you get them, which machine ID. And one of the things that isn't getting upgraded is my book. So we want to go to IRS publications, and every year they make these small changes. Like, for instance, they'd like to know who you're with, who went with you, your spouse, or friends, so that they begin to make these small changes. And so it's important to keep up. That's why I kind of switched over from this beginning and started selling the gambling record keeping, because in the last 5 years since I wrote that book, there's been these small adjustments. So the shop has is set up for 2021 because that's what the 2021 IRS rules said. And I was very proud to hear Keith say I'm doing it right. So if we go to the IRS, topic number 419, gambling income and losses. We already talked about this W2G I showed you, so you know what that looks like. But there's also a publication 529, miscellaneous deductions. This is a huge form. I don't know how many pages it is, many pages. However, if you look down the side of this sidebar, there's non-deductible deductions, but there's also a list of expenses you can deduct and a list of deductions. And if you go through all this, you'll find a section called gambling losses up to the amount of gambling winnings. And proof of winnings and losses, Keno, slot machines, people who have questions about table games, bingo, horse racing, lotteries. And if I scroll down there, it's a little hard to find it, but you have to scroll down to about the middle of the whole long page. They have some descriptions here. And one of the things that's shown here that I want to point out is what my gambling record keeping documentation that I provide on the simple form is these 4 things. It's actually 5 because it's won or lost. And so I count those as that last bullet point, the amounts you won or lost, I count those as basically 2 separate bullets. And then proof, and people have lots of questions about this. Feel free to read the IRS, what the IRS says about it. If I just say it, then it's, it's not updated next year necessarily. So there's also an entry here for slot machines, which I thought was interesting. A record of the machine number and all winnings by date and time the machine was played. If you get a W2G, that's on there.
That's on there. Yep, that is on there. Yep. I've seen it not on there, but it's supposed to be on there. Correct.
That was another question I had on this W2G, and there was yes, the date one, the recordable winnings and amount withheld, and then state and also local if that was used. But there have been times when the type and the transaction, race, cashier, some of these other things, what window? It cashier window, name of the cashier, window of the cashier, and some of these, don't get filled in. But I have encouraged people to, speaking of gameplay analysis, if you get a hand pay and you for this whole year, and then you just found me, and you're like, well, you have a method where you go back to the same machine and play it again, same time of day, same day of the week, and use that approach. But I wasn't, I just met you, John. What about all 2021? Well, check your W2G and see if it tells you that. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And then you can just review all your prior W2Gs. And and there you go. So let's keep going with the questions. And I will unshare this. And let's see what the next question is. So Shatter Main says, are records kept of individual players every time they step into a casino by individual casinos? I'm not sure if this is asking about what the internal operations of the casino are asking.
That's what it seems like to me. I mean, that's up to the casino, right? Because some casinos, you tell me, you guys, your community knows better from an operations perspective, but I know I could just take cash and put it in there, right? But I have to keep record of it. That might not be picked up by the individual casinos. So again, the onus is on the taxpayer to keep records at the end of the day.
Yes.
That's how the conservative view would be, make sure you're keeping your own records, regardless if they're keeping records or not.
And so I've heard from customers who have told me about internal casino operations for their needs. And yes, absolutely, keep your own records. The IRS wants you to do that. They're actually very generous about what deductions are included. Check the links in the video description. Gas, payment of gas, your food costs, these are all deductions. Maybe instead of recording your gas, you can record your mileage, but that's sort of up to you, which method you choose for that. But if you have a players club, if you use the card, then while you're playing, whatever you're doing while you're playing is captured by the casino. That may not come back to you. As much data goes into the casino may not come out to you, because it could end up being like 1,000 pages. If they recorded every bet and the result of every bet, then that would just become maybe unusable, unpractical. So what they might do is total your win per day, your loss per day. I hope, because the IRS wants that. But a lot of them will just do the difference, which is what the IRS, if you read some of those articles that we were flipping through, they talk about those as secondary documents. And what little I understand about secondary documents, like ATMs, withdrawal slips, and other things, they're secondary. And keeping your own records, even if it's your handwriting on a clipboard, that's what the IRS values.
That's correct. It can be handwritten as long as it's logged. It's a log, right? If it's handwritten on a piece of paper, that's all they'll take as backup if you were audited.
Yeah, or Excel spreadsheet or something electronic. And so what you get from the casino may not have what the IRS is asking for. If you've gone through a year already, you might know what they provide, and it might be sufficient. But then you might go to 15, 20, 50 casinos, and your log would just have an entry for which casino you went to. Or you could be getting these Players Club win-loss statements at the end of the year, which if you don't know what they provide, then it could be a real mess. But the log is easy. The other thing I wanted to say is sometimes you can ask the top gambler at Grayton casino in California, tribal casino. I'm going to say this poorly. Please don't cringe, Keith. He didn't use money. I mean, cash. They I want to put in $10,000. Do I do 100? What is that? Yeah, 100 $100 bills, for the next 20 minutes or something. Can I give you $10,000 and you give me a voucher for $10,000 that I can then put in the machine, one entry? And then, and we can do, and he was spending $1 million a day. And so it's a little hard to work with hundreds. Could you bring the wheelbarrow? and so when he started looking, and he contacted me about what he was doing, and he was interested in handling taxes. He had a lot of records, but he never, he would get 100 W-2Gs a day, and they didn't print them out for him, but he could ask for them at the end of the month or the end of the year. And that's how he was just handling this incredible amount of documentation for the IRS. And he told me he had won tens of millions and but lost one more million than those tens of millions. But he didn't seem to mind being $1 million under. Anyway, I don't I'm not trying to give out any personal information, but it was all pretty, like, I'm sitting there with my mouth open going, no, it's just scaled up.
It's a lot of volume.
Yeah, a lot of volume. And how do you even handle that? Yeah. Could I have a suitcase of hundreds? No, it's a fork truck. Jesse Carson made a comment. He made that comment before about Missouri Gaming Commission keeps a daily record of how many people come into the casino. You can have a counter at the door. They used to do that for riverboats, because there was maximum capacity on the riverboat before they could undock, back when they had to undock. So that's just some history. Whether you are only identified through your Players Club card. Perhaps a casino host might recognize you, but all the identification of the Millions of people who go to casinos is done electronically. Facial recognition, just to be, to talk about outside of the topic today, facial recognition doesn't work. Facial recognition works about this far in front of your face. Looking at the top of your head from the ceiling on a camera, even at an angle, is not facial recognition. It's just, it helps. I mean, it deters things because people think it's effective, but I don't want to get too far off of that. I think we're getting into some interesting comments. Let's see here. I want to try to get 2 more questions. Chuck asks a question. We may have answered it. What if you don't claim on taxes if you get tax forms from the casino? I want to point to something Keith had said, which is, I think you said, please confirm, that if you get a tax form from the casino, the IRS also got a copy from the casino.
That's correct. So it'll be on your IRS tax transcript, right? It'll take them a while, right? If you do your taxes and you forget a form, and let's say you don't put any of your gambling incomes or losses on there, and one casino has one form for $1,200, it will find you eventually.
And speaking of an experience, that has happened to me. I had 54, the second time I've ever had these, I did my own taxes with something called TurboTax, and I had 54 W-2Gs, and apparently I missed one. and it took a little while, but they came back to me and they asked me to do, to correct that. It seems like, we've got an extra, and
Yep.
and yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. This is before I met Keith. This is all several years ago. And ever since then, I've added my just as a tip, I've added my W-2Gs when I receive them to my gambling records, even though I do have that separate sheet. Because I want to make sure that when I go through and prepare my taxes, which I used to do, but now Keith does, that, I check it off as having been included in my preparation.
Correct. Preparation. And what John's talking about, it's a good test to do, is to add up all your W-2Gs and make sure go back to your log and your sheet that you're doing, and make sure that your log is larger than your W-2Gs and the amount of your winnings. That's kind of the test you can do to make sure you've captured potentially all your W-2Gs. You can still miss one, right? But they'll let you know if there's one missing. Or let's say you have a large one, but you have a lot more winnings on your sheet. The IRS doesn't know. Like, you might have $1 million in winnings and only 300,000 on W-2Gs, right? So they wouldn't necessarily know that one's missing, but if they did question it, you'd have to prove that one's not missing in that total. So it could get interesting depending on the volume that you have in there.
So the straightforward statement of you can deduct up to your winnings, and the IRS gets a secondary source, or also directly from the casino, as well as what you put in, and those two should reconcile on that data. But what if you had a lot more where you spend a lot more, and you had and won a lot more, and it wasn't on a W-2G, and therefore not separately sent to them, and then you just have to, I don't want to get into anecdotal stuff, but I have heard that it helps if you don't have like a big change from one year to the next, because the IRS is like, what's this? And so if you are established, then IRS knows what to expect. This is, please, Keith, tell me what you think about this. Because one of the things I get a lot of is, thanks, John, you're helping me to win. Now what? and it's, it is a big change from the point of view of the IRS. So getting through that transition, it's quite possible. One of the things that I try to tell everybody is that we're all self-taught at playing slots, except up till now. And now there's me. And, before my grandfather, was well, boy, this is how it works, and that, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but we're looking at irs.gov forums, and a lot of people, my point is, a lot of slots enthusiasts winning for the first time go it alone. That's what happened to me. That's what happened with everybody. And now we have YouTube, and we have guests on what to do with a CPA. And I saw some questions about the cost of CPAs, the cost of accountants, and other. Do you want to pitch anything as far as estimates, or would you rather just speak individually to people?
Yeah, I mean, it's all dependent on what level that people are doing, right? So if, for us, as for our firm, a typical tax return is probably $150 to $200 for an easier tax return. That would be like, W-2, you not have all these crazy things. You don't have 12 rental properties. You're not day trading stocks. You don't have, 75,000 casinos that you're going to on a daily basis and doing those types of things potentially. So it's all based upon everyone's individual situation, right? There could be people who have 7 businesses, 4 S corporations, 6 partnerships in real estate. That tax return is a lot bigger than a simple tax return. So it's all predicated upon each individual's, tax profile, so to say, of how we do our pricing, because it's based upon what's going on in your tax life.
Yeah, and just to clue people in, Keith works. You can tell he's comfortable online. He's comfortable in a YouTube live stream. I don't mean to speak for him, but a lot of his customer base is doing that sort of thing, and that means that he is comfortable with this sort of atmosphere. So you do get these entrepreneurs, these YouTubers with all these different things that they're doing. And that's his business model. This is not the CPA on the corner in a small town up in the Poconos. This is national. And I found Keith through talking to some of the bigger name YouTube channels out there. And who do you recommend? Just the same way I found my internet lawyer for my terms and conditions. I'm trying to find somebody with experience in what I'm trying to do. Now, since I know him, I wanted to and have had a great experience with him so far. I wanted to share some of this. I did ask that question about how often do people gamble? I did a survey, a big survey that I'll be doing again in another month. But almost a year ago, 10 months ago, I asked that question, and a lot of people said they go once a month. The most often was like once a week, and the others were like 3 times a year. And that's a lot of what we see. Now I do have that one gambler, slots player out in Grayton, who's doing tens of millions, but that's not normally typical. And I can imagine the price point would be different. I did not think it would be. It's not overwhelming for me. Staying away from numbers. Okay. Tony Mintz, can I use made up scratch off losses to offset casino winnings?
I recommend no, because you don't make up any losses, right? You have to document your losses and actually do them. So making them up, I would not recommend for anyone. That's an issue, because that's, not being truthful to the IRS, and we know what those tax laws and the power that they have. So I would not recommend doing that at all. So if you have scratch-offs and you keep them and you document them, that is written off against your winnings if you are itemizing your itemized deductions on your taxes.
One of the many things I hear on the internet, which is like, okay, that could be anything, is what if I walk around the racetrack after the races are done and just pick up a bunch of tickets, all losers. This is, the made up words here caught my eye. If you have scratch tickets, you have scratch tickets. If you spent money at a convenience store buying Powerball tickets, I won $3,000 in 2004 on my little trip there I talk about in the book for that week-long activity. And I walked in, won $3,000, and I left and I stopped at the convenience store and I put all $3,000 towards Powerball. And that was a lot of tickets, even 5 to pay per page, and a stack of 600 of them. It just kind of, nobody was in line behind me when I asked them to do it. But by the time it was done, it was like zip, 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 zip. And so, and I won $100. Never won $100 on a Powerball ticket before. So, I kept those as proof that I'd spent $3,000 gambling. Mm-hmm. But they were mine. So,
correct.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if, yes, I think answered that question. It was something I typed in. Just a couple of comments. Just trying to do this. Any last comments, Keith, that you might want to share? I might have a couple of things.
So again, your documentation is super important just to keep tight. And, in this community, it would serve everyone well to make sure that you're tracking what you're doing, right? Not only does it help you with what the community does with, knowing the best place to go and all those analytics that might go behind it, but from a tax perspective, I tell this to all my tax clients, documentation, because you have to keep it for 7 years for the IRS, is super important if you ever get audited. So just make sure that you're keeping your documentation, make sure you're tracking what you're doing. And if you did get audited, you're going to be fine because you have your documentation. If you don't do it, you're going to scramble around and it's going to be very stressful. So it's always easier up front to do it because 4 years from now, you're going to forget half the things you did. I don't remember what I did 2 weeks ago sometimes, right? Just let's all be honest. So it's better when you're doing it to be documenting it as you go.
Same way, and if you have to do it for this reason, that's why I always advocate, gameplay analysis. And was it busy at which casino of the two you go to? Did they have a Valentine's Day dinner that night, or was it the other one? It's just, these are the things that matter when we ask ourselves nowadays, what was Thanksgiving like? What will Christmas Day be like? Is it more of a Christmas evening, or is it Christmas Eve? And if you write down your notes in addition to the log that's required by the IRS, just a couple more columns there, then you will know next year. You can check back. And so there's that aspect of it. If you have to do it anyway for the IRS, then or if you're already doing it anyway to win, doing it just a bit more for the IRS isn't like you have to start over. And both of these things are required. I don't mean to give a warning. I was a compliance officer at my last position as an aerospace engineer, just something I did on the side because I enjoy these sorts of things. My boss would look at me and say, enjoy? Is that the right word? No, I find this stuff interesting. But we had this story that was going around where we had an individual who did research and was getting a job at another company. And the other company reported this individual for bringing in the first company's reports, which all proprietary information. And of course, she lost her first job and didn't get the second job. And the companies that she was trying to get into, the one that she came from, were all like, we're all doing this correctly according to the law. And she was just going to lose her old job and not get the new job, or he or she, I should say. But then the FBI got involved because this is the Federal Aviation Administration work, and it involved across state lines and all this other stuff. And she wasn't going to go to jail for any of this until she lied to the FBI. So don't mess with the government. All right.
That's good advice, John. It's good advice.
The IRS. What's that?
That's good advice. Just generalities. They have a lot more reach than people would imagine.
Yeah. One more question in the last 30 seconds. For backup docs, could a pre-typed form besides a handwritten note showing a loss be used?
Yes. I mean, people keep logs in Microsoft Word, anything that you have. I mean, that's considered a log, right? So just people do it for mileage logs. They keep a book. Sometimes people keep it in Excel. Some people use an app. People use notes on their phone. I have people who've actually taken the Notes app or like Evernote on their phone, taken a picture of it. That's your log. That's the way you're keeping your activity. Those are all fine methods.
I see Steve has a question. You can offset your winnings, but at the end of the year, you still have to add it all as income, and will most likely bump you into a different tax table, right? Can you write off miles? Looks like a second question. So
gotcha. So the first half, right? So let's go through that and unpack that a little bit. So any income, different tax tables. So yeah, it's income, right? So your income from what you're doing, you should be careful potentially. I don't know, income situation of Steve alone. So you could, once you cross chasms of 24 to 32% as you go up the tax table, that gross income, that gross gambling winnings could push you over the top, because if you're not itemizing, you're not getting the full deduction up to your winnings. So there could be that scenario there that could happen, right? When you do the scenario analysis that you won, but you're not itemizing and you can't offset the losses, right? Because you only have a standard deduction, that could push you up, right? So that would be dependent upon your own personal situation. It could change for each individual person. And writing off your miles, a regular person cannot use their miles to write off for their gambling losses. That's not where it falls onto your tax return, right? So you're not going to have the ability to write off your miles of traveling back and forth to the casino. Now, it begs the question of, if you're a professional gambler, that could be different, or if you're working in a different space, that could be different. But like if I go to the casino and I win $100 and I only spent $20 and I have $80, I don't get to write off the miles. That doesn't count as a loss. That's not the nomenclature that's in the tax rules around that.
What I understand is, if I were to go to Las Vegas for a aerospace engineering conference for a week, and on a Tuesday night I went to the casino and I had a good time, I could not write off the airfare.
That's correct. Against your gambling winnings, correct?
Right. And that's that. But okay, so wanted to be clear about that. I can't thank you enough, Keith, for being here and answering questions. If you have specific concerns, or even want to get an estimate, Keith's number is in the show notes, in the video description, and feel free to look him up. Yeah. I think he's awesome, and that's only reason I let him on the show. First ever guest. Thank you for being my first ever guest.
I feel honored. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel honored. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those who are interested, we'll try to do this. Particularly if the numbers come back as showing a high level of interest, we'll do this regularly, a couple times a year. All right, but not before taxes are due, because I think you might not have any openings in your schedule.
Unless we're going to do it 1 o'clock in the morning. If we're night owls, here I'm in.
Okay, we do a recording. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.